Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Rig Crafting. I'm the Rig Crafting Dad, and in this episode we're going to be talking power supplies. So we want to upgrade the power supply in our John's bow here. It's got the standard Dell 290 watt that we took out of that Dell OptiPlex 7020, and if we want to upgrade the graphics card to something other than the one we installed in the previous video, something that has more power, something that we can really game with, we're going to need a bigger power supply. Okay, before we go to the selection of wattage, I want to talk about the different types of power supplies first. So in front of me are a couple of different models here. First is the size. So you have your standard ATX, which is what these three are. I don't have an SFX. That is a smaller form factor. It's basically a pared down ATX power supply. Those are fit for smaller ITX builds or other builds where space is an issue. The other kind here, this is called a flex power supply. Again, this is used for smaller form factor PCs where space is really an issue. Next, we're going to talk about the power supplies and what you would want to look for in your purchase. So this one here is a non-modular power supply, meaning all the cables come bundled, soldered to the internals of the power supply, and you're just stuck with pretty poor cable management. In some cases, that's okay, especially if you have a case that hides the power supply. You can save some money by going with something like this because who cares if the cables are connected. Next, this is a semi-modular power supply. That means that the CPU and the motherboard connector are default, they are soldered to the internals of the power supply, but then you have other options for connectivity. So this would be your SATA, this would be your graphics card, or other peripherals that you wanted to connect to. Finally, we have fully modular. So this one has no cables coming off the back, and you can really customize what you want to connect to it. This also helps in length. So you may have a smaller case where you want shorter cables. You can purchase shorter cables to accommodate and have better cable management. Or you may have a very large case, in which case you need longer cables. There's also a plethora of other third-party cables that have LED lights and things like that. So if you really want to deck it out, a modular power supply is the way to go. So finally is the wattage. So power supplies come in a range of different wattages, all the way from 250 all the way up to some crazy numbers like 1,500 watts or higher. So you want to spec out the total wattage your PC is going to need. That includes all your peripherals, that includes your fans, that includes your CPU, and then the graphics card that you're going to be installing. All the graphics cards that you would see online today, they give you a recommended power supply for what that card can handle. So if you're planning to buy a pretty high-end graphic card, just refer to that and make sure that your power supply can handle it. Okay, so the next step is what I selected for this John's bow case. I picked out this Corsair CX650M. This is a modular power supply. The reason I went with this is because I really don't care that it has the motherboard and power connector for the motherboard hanging down. I'm going to need those anyway, and they're pretty good length. So there's no reason that I need a fully modular, and I could save some money that way. So we've got our case all the way open. We've got our power supply exposed. And before I get started on replacing it, I wanted to quickly talk about the Dell motherboard. These Dell motherboards, they have a proprietary 8-pin motherboard connector as well as the CPU connector, and you can't just take a regular store-bought power supply because it standardizes on a 24-pin. So you need some way of converting to that. Thankfully, Amazon to the rescue. You can buy a conversion cable. It cost me about $14, and you can take a standard power supply and then use it with these Dell motherboards. All right, so I've taken the liberty of removing the old power supply from the drive cage for this John's bow. The one thing to note is the orientation of the plug. This John's bow has a short extension cable which runs to the back of the case, so just make sure when you're mounting the new power supply that you orientate the connector on the power supply in the correct way. That way you don't have to do like I did and take it back out again. So, and you also see here I have now connected the 24 pin to 8 pin connector. All right, so we got the power supply installed, and I did orientate the power supply correctly this time into the power supply cage for this John's bow. And because it has this panel, you can't even tell that it is a semi-modular power supply. So again, you can save some money that way if your case can hide the cables in such a way. All right, so if you found this video helpful or you have questions, comment below, like, and subscribe. Thanks a lot.